Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. I'm joined today with David Zweber from Charlez Design. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Well, we met a couple years ago because you're an architect in the Minneapolis area, and I've seen your stuff around. You probably have blown up a lot longer than I've been following you, but I would say the last 5 years, I feel like you've kind of been on a meteoric rise. You're everywhere. You're on social media. You're on websites. I swear every single builder I know has either built a house with you or has been, so you're very well known in our area. And anyway, I want to have you on and chat a little bit about kind of your rise to stardom and kind of just check in with you and see how things are going in the architecture field.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it's been a great run here over the last few years. My company is only 10 years old. So we're in our 10th year this year, started in 2012. Coming out of the backside of the recession. As soon as I saw a little glimmer of light in the home building industry after the long silence during the slowdown and the recession, I wanted to jump back in, get back into that industry, and thought starting my own company would be a good way to do it.
Interesting. So did you work at a firm prior to this, or what was your background that you were kind of laying in the weight and then saying, hey, I want to start a firm?
Yeah. I kind of cut my teeth in the industry with a large regional builder. So not a national builder like some of the more well-known national builders out there, but someone that was doing production numbers. So building hundreds of homes a year, but just in this market. So I started with them right out of college and worked there for over 10 years. And really wore every hat there is to wear in the industry. So anything from architecture to sales to marketing to estimating and a little bit of everything. In a small company, you tend to wear a lot of hats, and it really gave me kind of a well-rounded look at the entire industry and what makes a building company really, really tick.
Interesting. Any reason why you didn't become a builder?
You know what? A builder's a great job as well. I always really liked the design side of it the best, and that's really where my passions were. So I kind of followed those, and there was times during the rise of my company that I considered becoming a builder. But you know what? I'm going to leave that to the pros like yourself and stick to the design side. There's plenty of work out there just for the design.
It's interesting. Come to think of it, I mean, I've worked with a number of architects and home designers and draftsmen over the years. I'm sure there's more than one. I only know of one company that builds and does their own architecture. And it's the same person,
Sure.
By the way. And I think there's plenty of firms that are design build, if you will, but they hire an architect or hire a home designer as part of their team.
Yep.
But to really be an architect builder, that's pretty unique. It doesn't seem like it should be. Why? Any ideas why that is so rare?
You know what? I think it's two completely separate disciplines, even though there's a ton of overlap between the two. What a builder does and what an architect or designer does are very, very different. And I think there's different, attributes about each of them that someone that's creative may not be great at telling a subcontractor to get your butt to the job site and do it. So there's different strengths that you need to pull upon, and I always say if you've got a strength in a certain area, follow that and follow your passion.
I think that's good advice. For myself, I've always admired all arts, really. I just took a tour of Hennepin Made. They do, handmade glass, and or my sister-in-law's a professional ceramic creator, and I have such a affinity for these cool artistic ventures, and I'm very untalented in that realm. And so I could never be an architect, I other than an armchair architect.
Yeah.
I love to look over your shoulder and say, hey, Dave, what about this? And you're like, oh, great. Now I have to humor your opinions as well as the client.
Sure.
And so, I have a great appreciation for the nuances of architecture. And I think one of the things that's been successful for myself in kind of capturing the spirit and the energy with the client is, I get as excited about their home, probably more so sometimes than the client does. And I think when a client interviews us as a builder, as you know, we just sat down with you recently where we brought in, one of our prospects, to sit down and interview with you, hoping to work together on that project. And, I think they see how energetic I get. They see how you and I would relate to each other.
Sure.
And they're like, hey, because my job really as a GC is to build a team.
Yeah.
And is everyone on this team going to be, simpatico, if you will, and kind of be in lockstep and work well and reassure the client that not only are they going to get a great build, is it going to be aligned with their value statement, but they're going to feel really good about the journey as well.
Absolutely.
One of my questions for you, so you started a firm, 2012?
2012 is the first year.
And when you launched off to start your firm, I mean, a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast are, either going to be business owners or own a small business. And it's always interesting to see that kind of the origin story. Walk us through like how that happened. I mean, and how big was your firm? Where did you choose to start? Give us a little, some of the details there.
Yeah, kind of a fun story. So during the recession, I had taken a break after my run with this local builder that I was working for. I went to work during the recession when home building in this market from about 2008 through 2010 was few and far between as far as the number of opportunities out there. There was a handful of custom homes still being built in this market. There was some remodeling going on, but for that period during the recession, for those of us that are old enough to remember, there wasn't much going on in the area. So I had went to work for a product manufacturer that does both commercial and residential installations, that produces a product that is still used in homes today, and they're a major player. And I was working for them, and I was moonlighting some architectural design jobs just for fun, just to keep my creative passions rolling. And what ended up happening was I started getting so busy with my moonlighting that the day job kind of became the secondary, which is never a position you want to be in. It's not fair to your employer, and it's not fair to yourself. So when it got to that point where I decided, you know what, I've got more work here than I can do during a moonlighting period, I need to jump out on my own. So I did that in 2012, and I worked for about 6 months with just myself and got so busy that I couldn't keep up with the number of opportunities that were coming in.
Oh, that's amazing. Where were these leads coming from? Like, were they friends, family, business, colleagues? Or were you were designing residential homes?
Yeah.
And were these like the plans that you design now? I mean, were these being built then by a GC? I mean, how far were you going with these? With these plans?
I would say when it first started, it was quite a few remodeling opportunities. That's really where the market showed the most gain early coming out of the recession, was remodeling opportunities. But remodeling opportunities led to new construction opportunities, and it just took off like wildfire. And I think, that's one big change that happened post-recession, because if I look at many of the major players in our market, prior to the recession, they had all in-house design and architecture. So just about every major player in town had an architect on staff.
Really?
And all those were one of the first positions that were eliminated in the downturn. They tried to get as lean as possible, cut down their staff. So architects went first, and then the estimating guys went, and then pretty soon it was just the builder there by himself. Mm-hmm. And when it came back, more architecture firms really popped up in this market. A lot of the guys that were doing commercial before kind of made the transition over to residential, started up some residential firms. But I would say that created a huge opportunity for me, because now every builder is a prospect, because it's not a design build firm anymore. It's just a GC or building contractor, and they were looking to outsource those services. So great opportunity for somebody like myself to I had the connections from being in the industry, which really helped. You get a couple of jobs and your name gets around a little bit, and it kind of snowballs after that.
And I know you're in Prior Lake now. Is that where you first started, or were you out of your home, I would imagine, those first 6 months?
Started out of my home for the first 3-4 months, and then decided, hey, this isn't for me working from home. I know a lot of people really love it. It wasn't for me at all. So opened an office in Eagan, worked there for 3-4 years, and then signed a lease down in Lakeville, and have continued my firm in Lakeville ever since. It's not a lot of my work is in that Lakeville area. It's really, I see a lot more work on the west side of town, the east side of town, And I do a little bit in my local market, but it's a good launching point for both sides of the Twin Cities.
Mm-hmm. How do you, so you said after about 6 months you hired somebody. Walk me through a little bit of when you knew it was the right time to hire, and maybe as we go through this a little bit, hiring and firing is always something that or someone transitions. Oddly enough, in 18 years of building, I've actually never fired anybody.
Really?
I've had about 4 transitions, but they've always either been in retirement or they've relocated.
Sure.
And I just think any business owner has to do these things. And so curious to get some of your insight on, when you hired and when you felt like it was the right time. And as you start, of course, dealing with overhead versus kind of your monthly outlay,
Sure.
Talk us a little bit through that process in those early years and even through to now.
Yeah. They always say that it's best to hire before you need the help, but rarely does that ever happen.
Agreed.
Normally it's, at least in my firm, we're hiring when we feel like our nose is just about underwater.
Yeah.
And you just need to fill a position, and that's where I was at. I had more opportunities on my plate than I could get done in a very long work day. So went out in search of somebody that had some experience in the industry that I could put to work right away. So I hired a single individual at that time, and worked out great. He was a fantastic employee. He would still be on my staff today. However, there was a geographic distance from where he lived to where my office is. And over time, he just decided he was going to work from home. And we since moved on. But that's worked out really well for me because I was able to reconnect with a lot of the folks that I had relationships with the builder that I was with originally, and I was able to hire them on. So 3 of my staff members were people that I had worked with since the early 2000s with the builder that I was at previously, and I had hired on somebody with a strong drafting background, and I'd also hired on somebody that has a great relationship building, communication, back office staff background, and is able to handle a lot of the things that me during my given day don't have time to do. The things that I don't prefer to do, I would rather be working on designs, meeting with new clients, and connecting with my builders, and leave a lot of those things that can be done by other folks to my staff.
Now, I assume you're referring to Lisa?
I am.
She's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I can speak for myself. One of the questions I was going to ask you that kind of leads into this is, in your words, as I've mentioned kind of to the audience, to me anyway, you kind of came on my radar about 4 or 5 years ago, just seeing you everywhere on Instagram, and just your designs were pretty iconic and different, and they just really captured. I think you've done an amazing job with like kind of your 3D modeling and your flyby stuff. Now, having worked with you, I get kind of a front row seat of how that's gone, but I can say that, we can work with a lot of people. Communication, you in particular are a phenomenal communicator, but so is Lisa.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as someone that recommends, you and your team to our prospective clients, communication, because it's important to me, but frankly, I just think it's important to anyone in business. If you can't communicate effectively, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And, but then also just, it sounds crazy, but like, why do you choose to work with someone? Like, they're likable. They're enjoyable to be around. They're pleasant. It sounds like really generic things, but if anyone's looking to start a business, it's surprisingly, the bar sometimes is actually pretty low. It's kind of like when your parents hopefully taught you just how to behave as a human being, like open the door, like say please and thank you. It's like a lot of business, a lot of stuff. It's not rocket science, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it is just being trying to be a good human being. What would you say to that?
I think you absolutely nailed it. Yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about. Communicating, setting expectations on the front end of things, and then living up to those expectations. And, it sounds simple to do. It's harder to deliver than it is to say. But, there's folks in this industry that do really well. And if I was to look at one key attribute of what separates the good from the bad, or the good from the just getting by, it's their ability to communicate. Clients are, when they're building a house, this is probably their single largest investment that they're going to make in their lives. They're extremely passionate about it. And when they're doing that and they're laying out that kind of money to build something special, they want to be really treated well. They want all of their ideas to be heard. And when they've got an issue, they want it to be dealt with quickly and professionally. That's what we love working with you, Mark, is that you've got the ability to communicate at a different level than what we typically see out there. And when you get to the end of the process, building a custom home is one of the most difficult things there is to do. People say it's not rocket scientists. Yeah, I mean, it's not. But at the same time, there are so many different things that can go wrong in that process just because there are so many different folks involved in the process from start to finish. You're putting your reputation on the line when you're, as a GC, you're out there in front, you're hiring all these individuals that really represent your brand. And if you're not able to effectively communicate your expectations to each one of those people that are touching the job, there's going to be a breakdown somewhere in that process. And the ability to do that all the way through the process, and in most cases, it's a year-plus long process that you're relying on them, plus an additional 10 years of warranty time afterwards. There's a whole lot that can go wrong during that. But if you set the expectation right, you've got a great relationship with your subcontractors throughout the process. They know what your level of expectation is. It just makes the whole thing go smooth. And if the clients are happy at the end, it reflects on everybody that's involved in that process.
I agree with that last statement a lot. You're right.
Yeah.
I think, saving a little bit of, not energy, but just knowing that at the end, I mean, even the best clients after a couple of years, I mean, we just recently completed a home together, and probably one of my favorite clients that I've built for, just an amazing couple, huge fan of ours. I'm a huge fan of theirs. But even at the end, they're just like, you kind of get fatigued. I mean, it's 2 years, of building and designing, and you just kind of want to live in their home. And not that we want to be done. I mean, we do want to be done, but it's like, and we've enjoyed the process. But sometimes now it's been 4 months, and now you get to the point where it's kind of like you sort of miss that client, you sort of miss that interaction.
Right.
But those first couple months, you're kind of like, oh, it feels good. It feels, you feel very accomplished to be done. But you're right. It's a huge process. But making sure at the end, you're right, as they go back, this particular client, as a thank you, had kind of a dinner party and had a food truck. And it's really neat for them to kind of throw us a party as a way of saying thank you. And so they invited a number of key people that were on the project. And I think your daughter had a volleyball tournament that night, actually.
Yeah, right.
And it's really neat that a client puts that kind of value on it, and we still stay in touch. But I just found this out. We had a commercial developer on recently. Do you know that residential? I actually was a lawyer. That residential law, you mentioned the 10 years that we have to warranty a house.
Sure.
That we actually are held to a higher standard than commercial buildings.
No kidding.
I was surprised at that.
Commercial's only
like 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
But the residential lobby group, I mean, we have Minnesota in particular has a very strong home ownership wing, and and we certainly celebrate that. We want people to be, they call it the American dream, own their home, and kind of celebrate that. We're definitely on the forefront of that.
Yeah.
One of my questions, just because I certainly have worked with a number of different designers over the years in terms of building a house. I'd be kind of curious to kind of do like a Jimmy Kimmel thing where you walk down the street and be like, what does an architect do?
Yeah, right.
And ask like 10 people, because I bet you get 10 different answers.
Yeah.
And maybe as you're
probably rightly so too.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with draftsmen. I've worked with home designers. I've worked with architects. Walk the people listening through, like, what are some of the differences and pros and cons of those different industries? Because they all have a very valuable point. To be very clear, I've built beautiful homes with each one.
Sure.
They're just different. Can you speak a little bit to those different avenues of, let's call it, home design, home architecture?
Sure. So, the hierarchy that you're speaking of, kind of at the top of that rung would typically be a fully licensed architect, somebody that's gone to school for 6+ years for architecture, that has studied the profession inside and out. In most cases, the college programs that are set up for an architect are really geared more to the commercial side of things than they are to the residential side. Most of the people that you see in residential architecture started at a commercial firm, but their passions really lie more in the residential side of things. So, their background is in commercial, their studies are in commercial, but they've got a passion for residential design, and they've made the transition over. So that's what I've found when I looked through the industry, because when you're in school, they're not teaching you how to design a house per se. They're teaching you about different methods of putting walls together and masonry properties and the strength of steel and all of these things that are certainly components of architecture. but the design of a house is really more of an art form than it is a science. It's all about balance and massing and proportions and all of those intricate details that really make a home special. So you've got an architect, you've got architectural designers, which I would put myself in that category. Someone that has got the background in architecture, isn't a licensed architect, but has got, schooling in architecture, has got the background in it, just has never really gone through the process of wanting to become an architect, which traditionally would put you down that path of commercial architecture, but has got, an eye for those details that I had talked about. And then you've got drafters that have maybe went to a 2-year school, that have got a background in how to do the mechanical drawings of a home design, and are really more on the putting together the details, but they're not quite designers per se. So there's a spot for each one of those different disciplines in the industry. An architect, the advantage of working with an architect is obviously they do have that schooling, that background, and a full understanding of all of the things that go into architecture. But there's going to be a cost involved in doing that. Typically architecture firms in our area are 2 to 3 times the cost of what you'd get out of an architectural designer, and could be 5 to 10 times what you'd see from a drafter.
Interesting. Do you think it's analogous to, let's say, a doctor and a nurse? I mean, is that parallel somewhat? I mean, a doctor, let's say, goes to school for 6 to 8 years, depending on their specialty, right?
I would say a doctor maybe to nurse practitioner.
I see.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, there's still a level of schooling
yes,
to go there, but drafter may be more of the nurse,
Yep.
and an architect would be the doctor.
I always like analogies. I always feel like it's another way of kind of referencing it. And like I said, I've worked with all forms of that architecture.
Sure.
And it's interesting to hear you speak about it in terms of even kind of the pricing model.
Right.
Certainly as we interview with our clients, part of it is understanding what their expectations are.
Sure.
Certainly as the build side, I love design. I also love to be able to build the house.
Yeah, right.
And so you can design something really pretty on paper, as you'll often hear as I have this one framer I saw one time where it was, they were essentially disrespecting an architect because they're like, we still have to build it, right?
Sure.
And sometimes there's a disconnect because, and I think it's a little bit like a stereotype, like any stereotype, it's not always true, but there's seeds of it where, you'll design, like arches are really hard, right? Or
Sure.
swoops or circles, and so how do you actually do that? Or back when it was a hand sketch, just because someone could draw on a piece of paper doesn't mean you could actually build that in the field.
Right.
And what's amazing about, your guys' ability to do details and to do elevations, and, if we have a question, we can call you and say, hey, how do we actually accomplish this? And you're like, and if you can't explain it, or if it's not a drawing, you can actually create a drawing that we can then hand to somebody in our field and say, hey, here's the detail of how the stone is intersecting with the fireplace and the mantle in a way that,
Sure.
looks good. And so I think I have a great appreciation for that level of detail, especially when it's thought through on the front end. Sometimes, even though I've been in the industry a long time, I'm certainly not a know-it-all, and we'll get to, let's say, the end of a project, and it'll be like this aha moment. And you're like, that's why the architect drew it this way.
Sure.
And it only, they thought that way all the way through to get to that end conclusion. And to me, it's a hats off and a clapping moment. Like that's pretty impressive. The opposite is also true. If you get to the end and you're like, well, how in the world does this come together? And, then you have to
Right.
come up with a solution. But life isn't perfect. I mean, I often will tell people that, you're building a one-of-a-kind house outside in the elements. It's raining, it's snowing, it's hot, it's humid. You've got thousands of, man and people hours into these homes. It's amazing we get as much right as we do.
Yeah.
And, I really try to explain to people that this is art. This is not science. And yes, there's science involved in the house with thermodynamics and some of these other things that we have to do, especially in our climate in Minnesota, but it's artistic.
It is.
And it's very subjective on what you like. I mean, you and I know this. Something that you and I may really appreciate, a client might not even see.
Mm-hmm.
And so balancing, what you and I like as craftsmen and designers with what a client wants and appreciates there's some nuance to that.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads me into my next thought, which is, in selecting the difference between a draftsman, architectural designer, or actual architect, it's not really what their degree is that is the reason why you should select one of these individuals. You really need to look at their past work and look if you identify with the art style that you see, because your degree from school isn't going to teach you to design to a certain proportion or style. They'll give you the background in that, but it's up to your own artistic abilities to really pull that off and to perform a craft that is individualized to each client. So each client feels that their needs and their wants and wishes and desires are being reflected by the architecture that is created.
So I have a question that leads into this, or this question that will lead in pretty well. So on your website and on the work that you do, I mean, you've told me in the lobby, right? Modern to traditional. I mean, you can do everything. But I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my perception. I would say when I look at your portfolio, I don't even know I call it mountain modern for lack of a better description. I see a lot of the flat angle, 5'10", 6'10" pitched roofs, especially more in our market. Is that something that you gravitated towards? Is that just what clients like because they like that it was different? I know you do the home that you did with us was very traditional.
Sure.
And I've seen you do modern homes and I've seen it on your portfolio. But as a percentage, it seems like the homes that I see that when I think of a Charlez Design, not as a specific style because you guys do everything, but it seems that do people tend to go towards that style? And what do you even call that style? Is there a word, transitional? I mean, people throw out these words.
I mean, mountain modern is probably the big catch-all term that people are using to describe the architectural style that you've just described here. I would say that's probably the style we're most known for in this market, and it's definitely a trend that is growing. In our market, there was about a 15, 20-year run with this craftsman-y style, heavy architectural details, big brackets, wide window trim, intricate detailing. And that had a great run in this market, and it's still popular today in certain segments. And I think it's a great look. But we had an opportunity, I would say 2015-ish, to design a mountain modern style. And you've got a couple of different opportunities throughout your career when things just will explode and things will take off. And we had an opportunity to do a mountain modern style, and it was featured on one of the local home tours. And people really gravitated to that style because it was so radically different than anything that was being done in this market. It launched us into a whole new category. And then you get a following of people that are looking for that style. So as a percentage of all the homes that we've done, it's probably, I would say definitely a third of what we've done out there is this mountain modern style. And we never want to get too pigeonholed in any one particular style. We love the mountain modern style. We think it's great, but we're always looking for the next best thing. We're always looking to expand our portfolio, show that we've got the ability to really create just about any style that is really what the client's asking for. And it's all about, listening to what those desires and wants and needs are and trying to come up with something unique and individualized to that client.
So I'm glad to know that it wasn't just my own perception or bias, that's verified. I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, so the builder and the client that designed that first home that kind of, let's say, launched this wave, I assume it was client driven and you responded to that client's
100%.
Yeah. Because I found that it's interesting. So just recently, I've been building for 18 years. Most of our stuff's been pretty traditional. And I would say the last 6-7 years, we've kind of taken a quantum leap up and really our clients have taken us. We've always done really good quality. It's not like someone can come to me and say, hey, Mark, I want to pay you less money. Do a crappier job. I'm just always going to do a good job. It just depends on how big the home gets and, how intricate it gets. But it was interesting to me that if I look back at my old portfolio that's no longer on our website, because they always say post the work that you want to get, and also show the work that you have done. Minnesotans in particular tend to be fairly conservative. Personally, for myself, I would love to do a modern home. My wife has no interest in doing a modern home, so you will never see Mark Williams.
We share this together,
and she's like, that's not going to happen. So you might as well, get over it.
Right.
But as someone who's very passionate about an industry, like I just love home styles. I just love design.
Yeah.
And I tell people, like, if you want me to design you a really cool sauna or a $10 million house, like, I can get equally excited about both because it's just unique. I'm very excited about design and the build of it, right? And we're actually relaunching our website right now, and what's been nice over the last couple of years, you mentioned kind of how opportunity met at a right point in the market for you to kind of explore this mountain modern. 2 years ago, we finished this extremely Jackson Hole, Montana, very rustic beam home. Not a lot of those homes around in Minnesota. We just finished about 6 months ago this uber modern home, all metal, glass, square. You and your team got to tour it.
Sure.
And then we did
Beautiful.
we did the home with you, this very traditional home. So on our website now, we're gonna have all of them were almost exactly $4 million. So we're gonna have 4 homes at the same price point, radically different. I'm extremely excited to kind of show that into the market, because not that I don't want to build, whatever my clients want, the traditional home. It's just really nice to show the breadth of range of what you can, so that people are like, because a lot of times, and maybe it's not what I've chosen for my career, but there are architects and there are builders that they say, hey, this is my style. I'm going to own this style. It's the only style I'm going to do. I do see some pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
Hey, if anyone I won't refrain from using their name, but there's an architect, and if you saw their home, everyone would say it's that architect. It's not even a question of who it is. And there's some benefit to that, I think.
Certainly.
I think my personality is too ADD to stay on one thing like that. Why would you want a breadth of range as well? Is it more of a personality reflection of yourself, or just you don't want to ever pigeonhole yourself to a particular style?
I mean, there's a couple of different advantages. Number one, and you hit on this, is I get a kick out of personally creating something new every time. If you're doing the same style time and time again, you might become, extremely good at doing that style. But to me, it doesn't scratch that creative itch that I have. It feels like it's just a different version of the same thing. I just get an absolute kick out of, doing a new style and going, wow, I created that and that really worked out well. And the benefit of that is that your portfolio grows. The clients out there that have these different styles will relate to, and normally a client's not going to come to you. On occasion it does, and it did with this mountain modern opportunity that I had way back in my career. But normally they're going to come to you because you've shown some sort of expertise in a particular style. So the wider your portfolio could be, the more chance or more opportunity you have of securing a client. And if you show expertise in each one of the styles that are popular, that are out there, your chances of securing more and more work are that much greater.
And this, everyone has to be the first.
Yeah, right.
It's like I was thinking about like open heart surgery. I don't think any patient is going to want to know that they're the first time that that surgeon has operated on their heart, right? It's your life. I mean, that's probably not your lead-in, right?
Right.
I think I'm grateful for clients that have given us the opportunity to do an amazing
Absolutely.
job on something, and really, we demonstrated to them somehow, some way, or they believed in us. Early on in my career, you'd get, we work with a lot of business owners, and I think, myself being younger, I'm 42 now, but not young or old, I guess, just kind of middle of the road at this point. But the point is that people would look at you and they say, here's a young person that is very energetic, seems to really, whatever their value statement is, and they're like, we want to give them a chance to do this home. Yes, they haven't done this style before, but we believe in them. And looking back now, it's a pretty humbling experience now to look back and you're like, wow, I'm impressed that everyone has faith in themselves, but for someone else to put that faith in you, to execute on that is a powerful mission statement. And now then to go forth into the public and say, hey, now I can do this. Here's the work I've done. I guess why I'm bringing it up is that everyone has champions in their lives, and hopefully several in their careers that help them kind of move up in this different strata, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a family figure, whether you're part of an entrepreneurial family. I mean, one of my questions for you is, do you have where did you get the entrepreneurial spirit? Was someone said this recently, that you're either forced to be an entrepreneur or you learned to be one because you had some role models around you. Which path was yours?
Yeah, certainly looking back in my family history, there was a long history of entrepreneurs going back to my grandfather's generation and before. Not particularly in the architectural realm, but in the housing industry, real estate development background is where I came from. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My father is an entrepreneur, and really on both sides of my family, you see that. So I guess it was maybe destiny that hit me as well. if you would have asked me in high school, do you think I would be owning my own business? No, because growing up in an entrepreneurial family, you see both the advantages and the disadvantages of owning your own business. When you own your own business, it's great, but you have got to be on 100% of the time, all the time. You know, that you can never just turn the light off and walk away from it. It's always out there, and you have to make a commitment to it. And if you love what you're doing, then it's not as much work as what you would think it would be, but you have to be committed to it. You have to put in the hard work, especially when you're first starting out and getting your company established. There's not a day off. You're working every day, and you're trying to meet client expectations. And if you do that, then it gets a little easier as you move on. But you definitely can never let your foot off the pedal.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember as a kid, my dad was builders, uncles were builders. I had it on both sides. And I had my own business in high school and college, a little lawn mowing service. But I knew early on I did not want to be a builder. Part of my story is kind of funny when I tell people, like, how'd you become a builder? By knowing I did not want to be a builder. And I remember, way before cell phones and internet, I remember, the phone ringing at 2 a.m. in the morning when it was raining and thinking, like, why in the world would anyone choose a business where they can wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning because the roof is leaking? You can't do anything about it. Thanks for letting me know. I'll send someone over as soon as I can. That's just part of the gig of what you have to do, right?
Sure.
And then as you get older and you kind of understand, people often see the benefits, right? Hey, there's time off. This person gets to travel when they want. But you and I know this, that, we have way more, quote, air quote, bosses here than a normal person, because every one of our clients is our boss. Like, we are beholden to our clients.
That's exactly the way I describe it to my kids. They say, do you love being your own boss? I'm like, oh, I'm kind of my own boss.
First I have to respond to your mom. Your mom is my boss. Let's get that straight.
Right. But every one of your clients are your boss. And that's a lot different than just having a boss.
Agreed. Speaking of family, have your kids expressed any interest in architecture? And, some of the people I've had on are multi-generational. I'm curious, my kids are younger than yours. I'm curious how, as a dad and as a business owner, how have you approached teaching your kids about business, and is there an opportunity for them to come work with you, and what would that look like?
Yeah. I would love for that to work out someday. I think that would be ideal. Do I think it will happen? It's a little hard to say. It's early. My kids are teenagers right now, and I really want them to explore whatever they would love to do. I am such a big proponent of, I don't care what your passion's in. My son's into video games right now. I'm like, great. You're into video games? Make a career out of it. What can you do that's different in that industry than what everybody else is doing out there right now? And if you love what you're doing, you're going to be successful at it, and you just have to find your own little niche. My daughter's expressed a little bit of interest, maybe more from an interior design side than from an architecture side. But as they get older and they continue to explore the opportunities that are out there, if it ends up working out, I would love it. I think it would be fantastic.
My kids are far too young. Mine are 6, 4, and 2, but I hope they actually don't want to be in the business, because I hope to be retired by the time they're ready. But I also, I guess I would echo what you're saying. I think thinking about now as a dad, like, if you're passionate about something and you want it, like, whatever that is, like, do that. Because the world is so open to people that want to create a business. I feel like when in history, let's call it the last 20 years, has it been easier to start a business? I'm not saying business is easy, but I'm saying, like, if you have an idea, and if you have, like we said earlier on in the podcast, like, the bar is quite low to actually follow through on it. I'm not saying that business is easy, but I'm saying, like, the idea, and, like, if you want to do it and you're willing to put in the time and the effort, and frankly, you do need a little luck. Time and chance happens to us all. You need to be, for myself, I started in 2005. I was frankly too little and too young I didn't have any assets to lose in 2008. So a lot of builders that were very successful went out of business. But if you don't have much to lose, I had one
probably
project.
The best time to start.
I literally hit, and so, coming out of that, now all of a sudden you look at kind of this big rise for myself anyway, and I think, well, I happen to be at the right time at the right place. And at this point, people also look at, hey, wow, you survived a recession. You must be doing something right. And anyway, that's a whole nother podcast for another time. But
I think it leads into something that, you had mentioned the bar is pretty low to get into business. I would say at no time in history has the bar ever been lower. With the advent of technology, all of those things that would have made it difficult in the past from an accounting standpoint, from a communications, from an advertising standpoint. There's so many tools available to us now because of technology that allow you to start a company, and with a couple of clicks, you've got your accounting system set up, you've got your payroll set up, you've got your ability to advertise to a wide market through free forms of advertising like social media. No other time in history have we had the tools that we have today. And if you have a passion and you've figured out a way to build a better mousetrap, go after it. Doesn't matter what industry or what your angle is, as long as you can do something slightly better or even do it as well as someone else, and just communicate like we had talked about. Communicate with your customers, set proper expectations, and deliver on what you say you're going to do. You're going to be successful at no matter what you want to do. And that's the beauty of our company or country, is nobody's telling you can't.
Right.
You're the only thing standing between you and going out and starting a business.
I would agree. And I think really, actually just going and doing it, it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things that was ever told to me was in like 2009, terrible time. I bought a spec home, or did a huge remodel spec in 2008, right before the stock market dropped by 10,000 points, right?
Great time.
Awesome time, right? What great luck I had.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to, in this case, it was my dad, and saying, hey, can you help me out in this situation? I need to cover my nut. I think at the time it was like $30,000. And I remember probably the best, I hope someday that I can have this parental wisdom to say this. He said no. And I remember being relieved because, you don't want to ask your dad, of all people, to help you out. You just know where else to go. And his comment to me was, if you can't figure out how to fix the ship from sinking, $30,000 is not going to solve your problem. It's going to delay it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't figure out how to solve it, you're going to go, it's just throwing good money after bad. And I remember feeling very relieved, kind of
Sounds like a wise man.
He basically gave me permission to fail.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking about it, and I was single at the time. I was 28 years old. And now in hindsight, it's laughable. I had a friend of mine who sold life insurance or disability insurance, and he asked me why I didn't want any. I'm like, well, I'm single. If I get disabled, I'm going to move home, have huckleberry pancakes, and, live rent free. I said,
right.
I could only hope to be disabled. And he goes, I have no combat for that argument.
Yep.
And but anyway, I think sometimes understanding that it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
I think it's super helpful. I think even now, thinking like, it's nobody wants to do that.
Well, the whole idea of failure is your motivation every day as a business owner. Is nobody wants to fail, so you're going to try everything in your power to make that from not happening.
Right.
So it's your motivation. It's the reason you get up in the morning every day, and it's your drive. And even when you are successful, you always have that failure in the back of your mind, and it keeps you going.
Well, it's the word business. I always think busy getting busy or busy being busy, but you're busy.
Yep.
And I think I'm a big runner. And so there was a book, Born to Run. And one of the authors said that, basically likening it unto why humans are born to run. And his deal is if you're a lion or a gazelle, it doesn't matter. When the sun comes up in the Serengeti, you better be running. Like the idea is you're either going to eat or be eaten.
Right.
And
you don't need to be the fastest. You just have to be faster than the slowest.
Yeah, exactly. That's like a classic shark swimming joke.
Right.
So going back to on topic here for just back to your company, what percentage of your work is directly to the client, and how much of it is coming through builders like ourselves that are bringing you clients that you interview with and go forward with?
Sure. I would say a vast majority of the work that I currently have has come through the relationships that I've built with the builders in our market. I try to maintain a strong relationship with the builders and deliver so that the builders look good. And in doing that, they bring opportunities to me, which is great because I don't have to go out and seek new business. Now, as my company has begun to mature over time, I'm getting more opportunities of clients coming directly to us, which are great. And I consider those the bonus opportunities that come to us directly. But I know in the back of my head that relationship that I have built with the builder community will continue to sustain. And it's the ability to keep a wider net cast out there. I can only reach so many people individually. If I've got builders out there that have their relationships and their nets are wide as well, it's better for everyone involved.
Now, I'd be curious to know how this goes, because I think it's a common story with builders and with architects, that relationship of like who brings the client to who.
Yeah.
And so let's use, like, obviously recently I brought in a client that I thought was a good fit. And so, I have relationships with several architects, and for me, I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
I basically make a value statement based on what the client is telling me. Does their budget or does their value align with said architect or home designer? That's number one. Number two, do I think that person's personality would be a good fit for said architect and designer? And then I don't want to give them 5. That's ridiculous. I'll usually 2. 2 is enough. And the reason I do 2 is just to show some breadth and some range, both for the client choosing us as the GC.
Sure.
And sometimes it's 1. I mean, a lot of my remodel stuff, I'll just say, you know what, this is the architect we're using. They've got their bandwidth, they're ready to go, and that's the end of it. They're taking our recommendation. When you get one that comes in directly to you, do you do a similar proposition? How do architects, you hear sometimes, this will lead into maybe a different question at a later time of like, if I was to go and ask an architect and say, hey, XYZ architect, my name is Mark Williams, I'm a builder in the area. I'd love to, work with you. Do you have any projects I could bid on? Is that an acceptable thing to do? How often does that happen? And how often is that needed?
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I would say this goes for both the architect and the builder community, as well as a number of other industries. It's all about matching personalities. That's really how you have to really divide out those opportunities, is by matching the 2 personality types that you think are going to work best together. Anytime you give a referral, it's an extension of your brand. So you want to make sure whoever you're referring out has got the ability to make your brand look good as well. So that's definitely how I do it. Did they perform on their last opportunity that you gave them? Were the clients at the end of that process happy with what they did? Was the process smooth in working through it? And was there a lot of hiccups? And did you have to teach them their job going through that process? Right. Or did everything go smooth? We had a happy customer at the end of the day, and it was really easy to hand them off. That's what I look for in these opportunities when I don't have a builder already connected to them, because the builder community, at least in this market, has a strong lock on the available lots in the market. That really gives the builder a leg up on the architecture community here as far as securing that client on the front end. A lot of the shows in town, the Artisan Building Tour, the Parade of Homes, the clients are naturally directed at the builder community. So I would say a higher percentage, at least in this market, of clients that are out there are going to connect with a builder before they connect with an architect. Not always. And we always, again, I think it's great when they come to us directly, but chances are they're going to land at a builder before they land with us. That's
interesting you say that, because I would agree with that. I mean, I think they just celebrated their 50th or 60th year of having home tours. We had the big night just a week ago where, they have the build of the year, they have different categories, and, you were there. And, our market, Minnesota Housing First, does an amazing job of not only advocating for builders in the home tours, but just really for builders and home ownership in the state of Minnesota. Yeah. And I talked to other builders outside of our state, and some states don't even have parade homes.
No. And it actually started in this market.
It did.
You see it in a lot of markets across the country nowadays, but it started in the Twin Cities area.
Which is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool.
It's phenomenal.
It's pretty cool. I know the Artisan Home Tour just come on the committee. They have tried to branch out to Florida, Kansas City, and that board has tried to expand and try to take that business model, maybe to other cities, because it is amazing. But the reason I ask is we had a designer on a number of podcasts ago, and she was from Texas. And she had just mentioned that down in Texas, a lot of builders or clients would come to the interior designers, and then the interior designer would recommend the architect and or builder. Sure. And, in different parts of the country, it's architect first. And it's just interesting. I think it's very geographically and maybe more specific even in the cities and the kind of the regions. I think it's just different. And just I'm so used to Minnesota that I kind of I've just always thought that this was the way it was. But as you network outside, you're like, oh, and this is not really the norm. It's just the norm for us.
Right. Yeah. And there's certain firms that advertise quite a bit to try to connect directly to homeowners. We run one advertisement a year, and that's our marketing budget. Outside of that, it's things like social media, and our connections with the builders is where we're getting our clients. If the market were to change and the opportunities become fewer and further between, we would certainly change our model as far as that goes. But right now, there's so many opportunities that are coming at us that we don't need to advertise a lot, which we feel very fortunate about. We can stay lean. We can keep our prices down because we're not spending an exorbitant amount of money on advertising and marketing.
That was one of my questions, was what you do for marketing, and it sounds like one ad a year. I might have to rethink how I do mine. Social media. Talk us. I mean, that's obviously how I first became aware of you.
Sure.
And it's kind of amazing at just how prevalent it is in our society today. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with how much you're on it from a business and from a marketing standpoint. Yep. I want it to be everywhere. From a personal user standpoint, I've set things kind of in motion, to kind of limit that, just because it's everywhere all the time. And you do, maybe towards the end of the podcast, we'll talk about, kind of unwinding. But for myself, I need to put certain parameters on it, especially as a business owner. As you mentioned, you're never off. So you kind of you still need to be refreshed. I mean, it doesn't do you any good if you're short with a client or you're fresh out of ideas. You need to be inspired as well. But on the marketing front, walk us through. I mean, I know you're big on Instagram. Do you have a big place in LinkedIn or TikTok, or like, what is it that you do exactly that's been successful for you regarding social media?
Yeah. I mean, social media has allowed us to connect to people that we would have never had an opportunity to connect with before. Started out my social media account when we first started the company way back, and it grew organically quite rapidly. And, housing is one of those industries that, everybody lives somewhere, whether they rent it or own it or staying in a buddy's basement. Everybody has a place to stay. So everybody is at least mildly interested in taking a look at different ways that people live. So I think there's a gravitation on social media to photographs of homes, and it's one of the most popular areas. If you look at the statistics of Instagram and Pinterest and things like that, home decor, exteriors, interiors, it's one of the most popular things that are out there. People love to look at it. They love to talk about it when you go to a party. It's just something that, fortunately for us, everybody wants to take a look at. So anytime we do a project, we make sure we spend a lot of money and get really good photographs of the project so you can see what it is that we created. It's really fun on remodeling opportunities. And when you look at the before and afters of, it looked like this today and this is what it looked like dramatic after we touched it. So very, very fun. And we just put that out there. Don't do any advertising attached to that, and just let it organically grow. And, over time, our audience has expanded from, friends and family locally to a nationwide and even a global reach and a big following. We had something happen to us here about 6 months ago where we had a fairly large organic growth in our social media campaign, and our account was hacked. And we went from having this big platform that was built out to starting over again. So
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to actually bring it up, and I wanted to talk about that because you hear about it a lot, and I'd love to hear some specifics, because if anyone's listening and your account gets hacked, like, what do you do? Like, you hear about, were you offered a ransom to get out of it?
No. It was, account was hacked. I had went on a public Wi-Fi when I was out of town on an opportunity. And somehow was account, and the account on both Facebook and Instagram were shut down by the platform because of what the hackers did when they went in. The ability to reach out to anyone at the Meta, who owns both Facebook and Instagram, they don't have that back end built into their system. There is essentially nobody to reach. So
that's crazy.
I essentially called every expert in the field, people that have strong IT backgrounds, and they said, "Yep, you're out of luck. There's no one to reach out to when this happens."
Wow.
So our 10,000 plus followers went by the wayside, and we're trying to connect with each of those people that we had from before, and we're slowly building our following back up again. And at first, I was really, really upset about it, because we get a fair amount of opportunities outside of our local market that only could reach us through these social media platforms. But I've since looked at it as a new opportunity to rebuild the brand, try to do it a little bit better than we did it before, and reconnect with a new audience. and have just looked at it as an opportunity, and we're having fun rebuilding the platforms back up again.
I remember because I called you because our home that we worked on together finished, and I was trying to tag you.
Yeah.
And I tagged you on previous photos, and when I went to go tag you, I couldn't tag you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what in the world? Because I knew you had a big following. And I'm like, how can I not tag him? Am I doing something wrong? Did you guys do a name change?
No longer existed.
And it's like, no, not existed, not open for business. That's amazing. Wow, that's yeah. Now I'm glad that you kind of took a relook at it and said, "Hey, we're taking it as an opportunity." Have you noticed how much harder it is to gain followers in today's market than it was when you first started?
The fact that you brought that up,
slower.
It is. I mean, those social media platforms when they were brand new, everybody was on them and everybody was, excited to connect and follow. And it's much tougher now than it was 5-10 years ago.
I mean,
really
we've been very active. We post, Monday through Friday. We usually don't post on Saturday and Sunday. And, we do a lot of reels and we get a lot, people always tell you need engagement. And we have a really high engagement, which, these marketing people tell you is great.
Yeah.
And they basically say like, well, numbers are important. It tends to be a little bit of a vanity metric.
Sure.
And so, but, you look at some of, sometimes everyone is guilty of it. You'll look at, mentioned home decor. You look at a designer that sells vases and they have like 500,000 followers. You're like, how in the world does this person have 500,000? I mean, I have 6,500,
Yeah.
I mean, it takes so long to get to that amount. And so I know early on the growth was just, incredible. And so sometimes it is discouraging as a business owner. And so I guess for those listening, I would just say post consistently and post often and just engage with the people and keep it small. Keep it, it's okay to be micro as long as people are interacting with you.
Sure.
You have something worth sharing. And, I don't necessarily think you need to have a large following to be an important person in your market or whatever.
100 qualified leads are better than 100,000 people that mildly follow you. And yeah, so you have to look at those numbers because I think a lot of times they're somewhat misleading. They're either opportunities that were bought or through some non-organic method had become following. You did touch on something that I have a question on. You said you don't post on weekends. Is there a reason for that?
So I'd mentioned earlier, just from a framework, personally, we have young kids. We have dinner every night at 5:30. And so, actually my phone shuts down at 5.
Okay.
And so I don't take calls nights and weekends. I mean, if it's an emergency, of course, or something, but I let my clients know about that ahead of time. And if anything, I think they respect you for it. Most of our clientele is older and they've raised kids. They kind of understand that process. And, I had one client that, amazing home. They did not have children. And I think it was hard for them to relate to that. And I told them, I said, I might not be the right fit for you. I feel like the fact that I told them that, I think they really respected that. They did choose us and we had a great build and, and they wanted to see pictures of the kids. And it wasn't just about that, but I also need time to have this kind of energy and to have your commitment and, to have like a 3-day weekend or have a way to really be re-energized. You need that downtime. You can't be on, or I can't be on 24/7, for a certain thing. I mean, you need ways to recharge. And so for the weekends for me, it's exercising, it's, I play tennis and I run and do whatever other sports, chasing the kids around and doing things like that. And so I just feel like I need that downtime. And I could conceive of maybe dropping a day during the week because I feel like weekends are probably your most valuable time on Instagram, meaning like all it would take is be a quick post and there's probably more user time. So that's something that was
the reason I asked.
That's the main
my
reason.
Experience.
And, the question I have for you is, do you manage your own account or do you have people in your office that kind of manage it? Or how do you manage the voice of your Instagram? Because I always hear that's really important.
Yeah. I do manage it all myself, and with help of our staff. So we're not using a third party for any of that, and I post what I like to see myself.
Yeah.
So if I like it, I hope that our following likes it, and that's really the only barometer or metric that I use.
I have one that is more of a nom de plume that I'm not supposed to mention, and it may or may not rhyme with knife. And so, there are certain things that I would love to post that don't make it past the censor.
Sure.
And so, whether it's reels or funny, it's always a balance between you want to be professional, but you also want to express your personality.
Yeah.
I probably tend to be a little bit more on the Jim Carrey side of humor. And I realize that not everyone appreciates that, although, he was a very successful actor. So,
Yes, he was.
And so we actually have one that I've been trying for months to get published. You remember the one where he's sliding the door back and forth and he says, Roger Predactor didn't die. He was tossed out this window. And it was at your house, actually.
Yeah,
it was.
yeah.
I had the leaded glass window. I had all the designer. It's an amazing reel.
Right.
People are going to love it. And I cannot get it by the SEC
no kidding.
to publish it because it's going to be great. But anyway, you wore with, you guys have a very professional feed. It's mostly home architecture.
Sure.
We balance what people, seem to like, which is what I like, reels, a little bit of humor. I also like people.
Yeah.
And so I find that if there's a person in a post, it's more likely, not that people don't like architecture, but if I can have both, it's amazing. It's something silly. Like if you have a video of a person and then it transitions into a home, you'll get more likes and follows and more reposts.
Without
if it's
question.
just simply just a house, it could be the most beautiful home you've ever built. People want people.
Yeah.
And so I learned that a while ago. If I can try to, mix in a story. I mean, people just like stories.
Right.
So
right. I mean, you're a unique builder in the fact that you've got a great ability to connect with people and you've got a presence about you. Your social media feed is one of the most fun that I follow.
Thank you.
Because it's not just looking at houses. Ours might be a little stale, really, when you look at it. I enjoy the humor side of it. I enjoy that it's a little bit different than
you're
everything
a dad.
that you're seeing.
Us dads have to stick together.
That's right.
The dad humor.
That's right.
I think actually
I would keep doing what you're doing. I think it really works.
All right.
I think it
Well,
really
thank
works.
you. I'll tell that to the FCC. They, it's because it's funny you say that because I get a lot of people. I mean, just the other night at the big night, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you're the, whether it's the funny guy or whatever. It's not like I'm that funny. It's just you're just trying to basically make it enjoyable, so that having fun." Going back to your earlier comment, like if you enjoy it, I mean, this is not real, or it's real. It's not a put on. I mean, it's just if I enjoy it. I mean, frankly, that's my personal filter. Do I laugh? Yes. Do I like it? Okay, that'd be good enough for me. And because like you said, you post the photos that you like of your own work.
Yeah. Right.
And so
there's another builder in town. I think he does a great job too. He takes a little bit different angle. It's not about being, necessarily creative or funny, but he takes more of the I'm going to teach you how a house is built.
Yes.
Which I think is very, very valuable as well.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people that are serious about building a house, you might not have a huge following for that, but the folks that are really taking a look at that, I think is very, very valuable. They're looking to this person and he becomes the expert at doing.
I think there is a lot of
thing.
we've been actually. It's funny you mentioned that. Nick from NS Builders out in Boston, he teaches this group that I'm a part of, and a lot of he has a podcast called The Modern Craftsman as well. That's very well known, but a lot of his videos are very instructional.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a passion of mine. I mean, certainly I need to know how to build a home, but really my main expertise is still building the team, communicating, and even though I'm not technically or classically trained as a designer, I mean, really my skill set. My mom was an interior designer. My dad was a builder. I mean, I am kind of the weave.
Couldn't be a better pedigree.
Yeah, I'm kind of the weave. Yeah, I'm a good dog. And and so that's really what I'm interested in as well. But I do appreciate those kind of tutorials, and we do try to do them. I think I probably know more than I think I do, and so I'll constantly be taking videos and reels of just job site stuff because people really interact. That's the other thing. I always used to think that you just post a video of a finished product. People love to watch how the soup is made, and what goes into this. And so, plus, it also gives you a chance to showcase your incredible craftsman.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, we're on time. Thank you very much for coming on today. Where can our listeners find you?
My website is probably the best place to take a look at what we've done. DavidCharlesDesigns.com, and that's Charles with a Z on the end. DavidCharlesDesigns.com. Really enjoyed the opportunity. Very fun. The hour went by in no time at all, and would love to do it again.
Sounds good. We'll have you on for round 2. And for anyone listening, you can see all everything transcribed in the notes, as well as we'll have all the websites and tags and handles for Dave and his talented team. Thanks again, Dave.
Thank you so much, Mark.